She's All That is the last film that we are covering in our high school adaptations of classic literature mini arc. I did not know this, but apparently She's All That is based on Pygmalion, the George Bernard Shaw 1913 classic play that was turned into many a film and the mega famous musical My Fair Lady. She's All That had a twisty run to production. Many rewrites were done, including by M. Night Shyamalan, who claims credit for having rewritten the script and for its most famous line.
My bet? Am I a bet? Am I a fucking bet?
The movie stars Freddie Prinze Jr. and Rachel Lee Cook, and, like its source material, is a bet trope. In Pygmalion, the question is, can this upper-class guy teach a lower-class woman how to talk like a posh person? In She's All That, the question is, can this popular guy turn this nerdy art girl into the prom queen? Freddie Prinze Jr. plays the popular guy, Zach. Zach was recently dumped by his super hot girlfriend. She leaves him for a newly minted reality TV star. His friends tease him that he's a loser now without this hot girl, and he claims that he actually made her.
The Taylor Vaughn you just described is an illusion, a myth. You strip away all that attitude and makeup, and basically all you have is a C- GPA with a wonder bra.
He says, in fact, that he can make any girl popular. His friend Dean says, prove it, and Zach agrees to let Dean pick a girl, any girl, for him to turn into prom queen. But Zach gets blindsided. Dean doesn't pick a reasonable choice. He picks overalls-wearing artist Lainey, played by Rachel Lee Cook. No one can make this girl hot, Dean. She has glasses. Zach has a drawer full of Ivy League acceptance letters sitting at home in his mansion. Lainey may or may not be heading to art school, and her dad is a pool man. Zach starts to pursue Lainey, and Lainey both doesn't believe him that he's actually interested in her, and also isn't interested in dating him. She works at a falafel place. She's involved in the local art scene. She's helping raise her younger brother, played by Academy Award winner Kieran Culkin. She's busy, Zach. Zach wins Lainey over by doing a deeply moving hacky sack performance art piece, and by being nice to her little brother. Zach, in the meantime, has to beauty up Lainey as part of his bet. So he recruits his Academy Award-winning sister, Anna Paquin, to do a makeover. Side note, this is the most pedigreed movie that we are going to cover on this show. 2 Academy Award winners, Usher, Gabrielle Union, Dule Hill, M. Night Shyamalan. What is this movie, people? Anyway, Anna Paquin and Zach do a practice run with Lainey's new makeover look at a party. Meanwhile, dickish Dean starts pursuing Lainey because Lainey has actually transformed into being hot. Plus, Dean likes to fuck with Zach. So when Lainey finds out,
Am I a bet? Am I a fucking bet?
She ends up going to the prom with Dean. Zach hears that Dean is planning on trying to sleep with Lainey, so runs after Lainey to try to save her virginity. But he need not have run. Our girl has saved herself, blowing an air horn in Dean's ear as he tried to make a move on her. When Lainey gets home from the prom, Zach is waiting for her. They go out into her backyard, which has a pool that her dad has decorated with white twinkle lights. Zach apologizes. Lainey realizes it isn't about the fact that she's hot now. She was always hot on the inside, and they kiss. In case you can't tell, I hate this movie. There are some interesting, enjoyable bits, but mostly I find it to be a cynical cash grab while the industry was hot on this trend of high school adaptations. But it is a fascinating document of the glow-up transformation narrative. Here is Tim Sherry on the ugly duckling to swan trope and how it is portrayed in the film.
The end of the movie, when they're dancing out by the pool, she's still the transformed swan that he can now appreciate. But isn't it good that she's still not wearing glasses and overalls? You know, he doesn't go back to her in, so to speak, her natural state down in the basement working on a painting in her overalls and glasses. She's still in a pretty dress after the prom looking great. And yeah, he's supposedly learned and changed and come to appreciate her more for who she is. Oh, that's nice, but she's also hotter, right? And that's what these movies tend to traffic in, especially the Hollywood variety. You know, you talk about a conservative movie. That's a fairly conservative movie. She's All That is pretty reactionary, really, because let's face it, what he's asking her essentially to do in so many ways is, you know, tone down the art part, tone down the natural part, be less of yourself and be more like these superficial other girls so that I can like you better and we'll all be happy. Well, that formula should make us wonder.
Even though Zach has lied to Lainey, bet on her, tricked her, and changed her, we are still supposed to be happy at the end when the two of them get together. Part of this is because we just firmly believe that wealthy white men who won't rape you really are always a prize worth winning. But another reason is because Lainey has now learned an essential skill, how to exploit her natural beauty. And we're grateful to Zach for being key in her education. Here is cultural critic Hope Rehack.
There's a certain kind of girl that I am also that would rather her be authentic and dress in her oversized denim shirts and overalls splattered with paint at prom. But I think the lesson in part is choosing to use femininity and performed femininity as a tool in your toolbox. And it's basically saying that if you're not at least aware of the ways that you can use them in a targeted way, you are giving up part of your power. That is the essential argument. That's also true of Pygmalion. I mean, Pygmalion, Eliza, is transcending class. And so the idea that you can transcend class with walking a certain way, speaking a certain way, and dressing a certain way is very much the lesson of She's All That, which is that you can ascend from where you started if you learn this language of dressing up for prom. It doesn't mean that she's always going to dress up for prom. It means that she learns she can access new spaces when she's learned how to perform in feminine drag.
Lainey's learned drag. Zach, in theory, has learned that great girls could be hidden in overalls. This is a movie that claims to be about transformation. What about us needs to change, and what about us should stay the same no matter what? But I would argue that it's actually a movie about costuming. I'm Vanessa Zoltan.
And I'm Ronald Young Jr.
And this is Hot and Bothered. Welcome, Ronald. It's such an honor to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Can you just tell people a little bit about yourself, why we were so brilliant for getting you on this show?
I am Ronald Young Jr., as you said. I'm an audio producer. I'm a host of the podcast Wait For It and also Pop Culture Debate Club and also Leaving the Theater. I talk about body image and I love talking about pop culture. And I think that's why I'm here. I think it's because of pop culture. That's why I'm here. I don't think we're talking about body image today, although I'm probably going to slip it in there talking about the movie we're going to talk about today.
I think body image is a huge part of this movie. The makeover is contingent on her already being skinny.
It's true. And there's also other fat phobic elements that kind of like burst in starting from the beginning. There's a fat guy and a Twinkie, which I was like, okay, come on. And I had to remind myself, Ronald's 1999. It's 1999. It's 1999.
Yeah. And one of the ways that our main character shows that she's a good person, one of the virtue signaling things is that she is trying to help her friend lose weight.
Which I was like, I had to double check and be like, this is the protagonist, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is the protagonist body shaming her ostensible best friend, right?
Yeah.
So what is your relationship with this movie? Did you watch it back in 99? Do you watch it every year as part of your appreciating how far we've come as a culture initiative?
I did not watch it in 1999. The movies I was watching back then were the American Pie movies and Not Another Teen Movie, the spoof, which spoofed She's All That. So I have relationships with the 90s and high school movie tropes. This was one that I missed. So I was able to watch this movie completely unburdened by nostalgia, which kind of gave me a different viewing experience than most. Like, I think I went in with a far more critical eye than some others did.
Yeah, I'm proud of you that you somehow missed this movie. I'm just going to be honest, Ronald. I do not like this film.
You know, I was concerned that I was going to have to like burst your bubble if you did like this film. I watched it and I remember being like, why did people like this? Is really reinforcing some very negative stereotypes.
So I went and saw this with my friend Katie in the movie theater, you know, in Westwood, California. And Katie and I both are beautiful women and were beautiful women, but curly haired, not size 0 women. And I remember us talking after the movie about like, well, this is who you picked for the makeover, an already super skinny, gorgeous, model-esque woman. And it just felt like the world saw us as hopeless and as a joke and totally not possible as a romantic lead, even in our own lives. And I will say, Katie and I, neither of us ended up going to the prom. And I think that I really do think part of why we didn't get asked to the prom is because of the norms reinforced in this movie and that this is what people were watching at the time. And it really was like only skinny, beautiful people deserve to go to the prom.
Yeah, this movie centers thinness in a way that it almost feels redundant at times.
Yeah.
Freddie Prinze Jr. actually says when they are picking the Rachel Lee Cook character as their project, Freddie Prinze Jr. actually says, "Fat I can deal with, but her," and I'm like, okay. I almost broke trying to process the layers of problematic. I was texting a friend while watching it. I said, this movie keeps interrupting itself to be more problematic.
Yep.
At one point, Rachel Lee Cook is at the beach and she takes off her clothes and gets approval from everyone else, which I'm like,
right.
Wait, that's all it takes. You just got to be in shape. Like it's this weird thing of you can be air quote ugly, but just don't be fat and you'll be okay. You know?
Right. Gabrielle Union is going to welcome you into her beautiful
Correct.
arms.
Gabrielle Union, quietly the most attractive person at that school who is also sidelined. Which I'm like, this feels racial, but we're not going to talk about that.
Oh, this movie feels racial in a lot of ways. It gets its title from a spontaneous rap in the middle of this very white high school.
Oh my God, that rap! It we're getting into it, but that rap, I said, where were these guys the entirety of the movie? They showed up to do a cipher in the middle of this white ass high school.
Except that Usher makes announcements every morning.
Usher is on. Why is Usher? Usher filmed this movie by himself. If you notice, he's barely in scenes with other people.
Yes, no, he's never. No. I'm happy for him. I hope he got the Bruce Willis $1 million a day deal.
Well, you know, he was doing movies back then because he did The Faculty, if I'm not mistaken. He did like several, he did like 4 or 5 movies at the time that were all like him showing up, being Usher or doing some horrible acting and then disappearing. So I think they were trying to say, hey, can this guy be an actor as well? But I think he chose the right lane because this Usher renaissance, I think we're all here for it.
Okay, Ronald, I feel like we've set up our feelings. So what does this movie believe about love?
I think it has very traditional positions on love. Mm-hmm. And it kind of starts with a very pragmatic view, which is that love begins with attraction, which is, I mean, if you think about it, it is the most pragmatic way that we look at love. And we kind of reinforce this stereotype all the time with the capital B, beautiful, capital U, ugly, when we talk about who is accepted into those camps of what we consider to be acceptable or unacceptable partners. So it starts there. it basically does the opposite of what that show Love is Blind on Netflix does, which is it kind of overtly says to you, love is not blind. The first thing you have to do is see someone as a sexually viable partner. And then if you connect with them after that, this could be someone that you could have a future with, which is kind of like, I mean, unfortunately, a very common path for a lot of folks. So I think that's what the movie believes about love.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to spend a minute in the sort of like selection of Lainey, the Rachel Lee Cook character, as the object of the bet. And you already mentioned this comment, but Freddie Prinze Jr., as Zach says, fat I can deal with, right? I can make a fat girl the prom queen. And the implication is that there is something about Lainey and her grumpiness, maybe, that means that she is not easily malleable as a potential prom queen. And therefore, I do think that the movie is saying that someone who you can easily manipulate is not going to be someone who you will fall in love with. He would have been able to fully objectify a quote unquote ugly person, but an eager ugly person, and therefore keep her at a distance. Whereas there is something about Lainey and the fact that she is not interested in becoming popular. She's a real grouch about him. She's very skeptical about him. That actually makes her perfect for him to fall in love with. Her resistance, the fact that she is unwilling to be manipulated and controlled by him, is what makes her, in theory, an equal partner. And so there is something about the fact that Lainey has her guard up with everybody else, but she lets him in, that means that they are good for each other, right? So like love invites vulnerability is the other thing I would say this movie is arguing about love.
I would like to throw a wrench in that right now.
Please. Yes, sir.
I think that's what the scriptwriters who wrote this think is what they're saying.
Absolutely.
As a matter of fact, I feel like if it was the test question about this movie, that would be the correct answer. I feel like the thing that I would be writing down in the essay portion and on the back of the test is that it's hard for them to say about her having vulnerability or letting down her walls when this man is harassing her, i.e., if he were not Freddie Prinze Jr., if this were a man at the gas station asking for $10, we'd say that was harassment the whole time. So there's this wearing down effect as opposed to vulnerability and letting it in, where she kind of just acquiesces to the fact that he won't stop, even though she said no.
Yep.
This movie would be over in 5 minutes if they made it today, because she'd be like, no, thank you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to hang out with you. I have a bunch of stuff on my mind. My mom died from cancer. It's impacting the rest of my life. I have a little brother who has disabilities and he needs my help. My father is here trying to run the household. Like, I have a lot of things going on. I don't need to deal with you. These art nerds are threatening me. You are the last thing on my mind. I know a movie needs to be a movie. It needs to have a beginning, middle, and end, but it wants to posit this whole, like, just open your heart and let love in. But the truth and reality is, like, anybody who's worth being with is going to be malleable and respond to what you give them. And if they're giving you something like that, where they're saying, no, I'm not interested, your response would not be to be more persistent and keep beating down the door and forcing them to, like, come into your world. It would be some sort of different approach. It would be like, hey, oh, I see you're busy right now, but when you're interested, I want to maybe take you for coffee or something at some point. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it would be different in that case. And maybe this is Ronald's hard dose of reality that I'm forcing onto the movie, but it really bothered me. The harassment aspect of this really bothered me.
Well, what bothers me about the movie is that the tone pretends to be this light comedy, and yet I really do think it's a mean-spirited movie.
Yes.
And so, Ronald, we have a segment in the show called the emergency stop button. And this is where I'm going to hit my emergency stop and talk about the bet trope. So there is this trope of the bet in romantic comedies, and there are many different ways that a bet trope can go. We talked about this on How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, where the evil of the bet is sort of worked around by the fact that there's a mutual bet. I would argue that this movie, which is something I learned about from tvtropes.org, an incredible website, is something called batsu, or a punishment trope, where the goal is that part of what's fun about the bet is that you are punishing the person who's the object of the bet. And so I don't understand how Lainey would ever fall in love with Zach, because that opening act of cruelty of saying, what makes this bet funny is how unappealing you are. I thought you were so unappealing. You were so objectively unappealing that it was going to be funny to dress you up. It was going to be funny, the idea that you could be prom queen. It's not his sexual prowess or his ability to lift her up that is the humor of the bet. The humor of the bet, in theory, is her humiliation. And so that's just unforgivable to me. And so the whole movie is mean-spirited. And at no point is there a sufficient grovel in which he is like, that was so horrible of me to manipulate you for so long. And instead, the path that we see Freddie Prinze Jr. go on is that he's learning from her, right? He does the hacky sack, performance art moment where he talks about the pressure of being him. This, in theory, objectified woman just becomes the way for him to grow himself. And this movie pretends to be a lighthearted rom-com, but it's actually so mean.
And I think the problem with Batsu and with this movie is there is a power imbalance that is never rectified, because this is a straight cisgender white man inflicting this on a woman who did not ask for this. She did not ask for this whatsoever. And they're playing it, like you said, as trope, as isn't this a fun teen movie? And it's like, the truth is it's not. And honestly, they overcomplicated the character of Zach by giving him all of these. He's like, oh, he is the third highest GPA in school. Then why are you doing this dumb stuff?
Right.
So I think it's hard for you to watch that movie at the end and be like, oh yeah, he's naked in front of everybody. Okay, yeah, this is a guy with a great body who's attractive to everyone. How is this a punishment? You know what I mean?
Right.
And he's doing it at graduation. There's no adults worthy. I'm sorry. I'm going on a tangent. But the point is, you're right. No significant
but he's
grovel.
not punished.
Not at all.
There's nothing. Which does lead me to what I think that this movie is subtextually saying. And it is also critical. I just want to say that I'm hating the movie, not the fans, right? Mm-hmm. If this is like the movie that you like to turn off your brain and enjoy, I just would like to say to our listeners, I watch a lot of worse movies and love them. And so I'm going to say that the subtext of this movie is a lot about the makeover. And I love a makeover montage. I love a part of a movie that is like about going through a magazine and just looking at beautiful things. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with the fantasy of a makeover. I absolutely think that this movie has a supremacist idea of attractiveness, and that is embodied in the way that this makeover happens, because Lainey has a makeover in order to go to a party. We are led to believe that this young woman, Taylor, is the most beautiful woman at this high school.
Led to believe is the operative word, because Gabrielle Union is right there, and I refuse.
Yes. And the way that the movie shows that Lainey's makeover was successful is that they effectively put her in the exact same dress, the exact same outfit as Taylor.
Yes.
And during the makeover, right, Anna Paquin is doing this makeover on Lainey, and she is saying, like, this haircut is objectively the best haircut for you. Mm-hmm. And there is a belief that there is the apotheosis of attractive, and Lainey has access to that through a makeover, and that any other form of attractive is less attractive than this Taylor Lainey attractiveness. And yeah, I think this movie absolutely believes that Gabrielle Union is less attractive because she's Black, right? Like,
yes.
if you can't look just like Taylor, then you are not as attractive. This is absolutely a supremacist idea of beauty.
It also sidelines Dule Hill in a very specific way to like almost like quasi magical Negro character where he's there to teach lessons and be adjacent to the harm, but not actually cause the harm.
And be a little judgy of the harm, but still be able to laugh at the harm.
But do nothing to actually stop the harm. That's one. And then the second part is like you have all these people at this school, and for them to set a hierarchy and decide who is the most attractive, you basically have to convince me, the audience, that this person is the most attractive. And that's kind of like the problem with most high school movies is it says you should think that this person is the most attractive because we told you.
Yeah.
It really wants to force us to kind of be like silent co-conspirators and co-signers of the plot itself, which that's tough to do when I'm sitting here looking at the movie, making my own decisions and saying, okay, you know, you took off her glasses and tweezed her eyebrows, and now you're positing to me that now she's attractive. But like, there were plenty of people that looked at this hot art girl and was like, man, that hot art girl is really hot. And all those art hotties are all hot. They don't have to change anything about themselves. But to say that you have to swing into this lane of capital B beautiful in order to actually obtain beauty is just, it's tough. It's tough for me to like sit there and accept that, especially in 2024.
Yeah. The movie is simultaneously arguing that there is something beautiful about Taylor that is just like intrinsic to her natural beauty and is also about the way she gets stylized, right? Zach makes a comment about how, right, like it's her push-up bra. And again, it's this red dress, right? Like it is the way that she shows up at the party that matters. Taylor would absolutely not be considered beautiful in overalls, which is 90% of my wardrobe, so I take that personally.
But even when it takes on what Zach is saying, this idea that anyone can be beautiful with a push-up bra and, you know, whatever else he said, it's still saying that there is an amount of work and or effort in order to get into this category of capital B beautiful, but there are still standards that are expected.
Right, it's still a category.
Correct. And there's boxes you have to check. There's all of these ways in which they're saying, if you don't check these boxes, you cannot actually be acceptable to us. And I think the movie keeps like kind of ramming that, like keeps like inflicting that on us. You know what I mean? Just bashing us over the head with that again and again. And even though it's trying to posit that naturally Taylor might not be beautiful, but she does the work to be acceptable, which I'm just like, that's what, why are you positing that? What a weird theory, you know?
Yeah. I have to put an asterisk in here because it is slightly related to this film. Around this time, Sarah Michelle Gellar did an interview in which they were asking her about her exercise and eating routine. And she was like, I would like to be clear. One of the things that I hate about being in Buffy is that women look at me and think that they should look like me. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I would like to name all of the people that work with me in order to keep me looking like this. And it is my job to look like this, which means I get to spend hours and hours and hours a day trying to look like this. Yes. And so these are not the standards that I want, you know, my viewers to try to hold themselves to. And like, this was in the 90s. She was like, it is the most problematic part of my job. I will find this interview. It's incredible. And the reason I say it's related to this movie is because she has a cameo in this movie. I
saw that cameo and I remember I freaked out. And I was just like, why is she not in this movie?
Yeah.
And also, if Sarah Michelle Gellar was at this school with Taylor, like, what? Stop playing with me about who's the queen bee of this school. Like, I know I'm still Gabrielle Union, but like, she's right there. Stop it.
Ronald, what would you say one of the subtexts of this movie is that you would like to highlight?
I mean, I've been saying it over and over. I think, again, there is a level of effort that you can put into in order to be considered acceptable and then even further exceptional. Which, I mean, if you think about it, it's the same treadmill of the American dream that we're kind of fed all the time, which is that you have the power within you to do the thing that you want to do. And the truth is, you have some power within you to do some things, but without some help, you will not get to the places that you think you should be or think you can go. That's the actual truth. And even in the places that you do have power, you are going against such oppressive forces against you. If you don't have help or support or resources, you won't get that
or
far.
the right race or body type.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If you don't have those things, I mean, look at Lizzo, who is a wildly successful pop star. Right now, she's losing weight. She's losing weight, and it's like, it's a plot.
Yeah.
When I say that, I mean a plot line in American society where everyone's kind of looking and being like, okay, Lizzo's losing weight. Hundreds of thousands of people in her comments encouraging her and saying, wow, you look great. What a great job you've done. You've already won a Grammy. You've already won VMAs. You've done world tours, stadium tours. You have a huge fan base. And yet you're still working to be considered acceptable in this capital B beautiful category. So I feel like the subtext of this movie is saying, like, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, you still need to be able to do these things to be deemed physically acceptable to us, which that's wow. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. What are we learning about high school movies through this movie? What does this movie say about high school, the high school experience?
You know, I think movies like this do damage to all of us because it highlights a specific experience in high school as just regular. Like, this is what we all have to go through because that's high school. And there are plenty of people who have had high school experiences that do not mirror this. I know plenty of people who spent their entire high school career in the band hallway having a great old time. The idea of having to do this social climb is not something that is required. We see people who do it, but the idea of having to do it, that's not required. The second part is there's a key scene towards the end where Taylor says to Lainey, you thought you could be popular? And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird that y'all are naming it.
Right.
We all were in high school. We all knew that there were people whose names we said a lot that we would consider to be the popular kids, known around school, do whatever, all of that. But there's like this assertion of this hierarchy. And I'm just like, yo, you know, there's plenty of instances in which the popular kids were good friends with the unpopular kids because they grew up together, they live near each other, their parents are friends, like all of these, and ways in which it's like the band kid is still the band kid, but he's still walking by Zach. Hey, what's up, Zach? You coming over this weekend? All right, cool. Yeah, we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons. And it's like not social suicide and all that. But they form these rules in these high school movies that say, the mathletes are social suicide, when it's like, it's not though. You can be smart and still be popular, or you could be wildly attractive and still be unpopular. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like that they don't turn these tropes on their heads the way they should. They keep reinforcing this in the way that I don't always think it is, you know?
Even Lainey's dad, the Kevin Pollak character, he becomes legibly a success to us at the end. Part of Lainey's unpopularity is that her dad is a pool man. He's cleaning other people's pools. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the movie, he's like, I don't know why people look down on pool men. I own my own business. I own my own house.
A sick house.
With a pool.
Yes.
He has his own pool.
What y'all talking about?
Who's cleaning that?
Yeah.
Right. And so he articulates, like, legibly, we belong in the popular crowd too. And it sounds at first like what he's saying is the standards are stupid that they hold us to. But actually what he's saying is we meet those standards.
Yes. I love that you said that, because a normal person watching this, and I'm not calling you abnormal, but like we were watching this with a very critical lens, but like any regular like watcher would watch this and be like, yes, they're saying that they're good enough, that but the idea of saying like, hey, actually we meet the requirements. We are acceptable, which is like, oh, that's the wrong messaging. You should just be like, it doesn't matter what the requirements are. You have a house, you have a pool, you're going to college, I can pay for it. Like, everything's going well for us. Why are you worried about these other things? There's a whole big world out there. Right. You know what I mean? And I'm taking care of you. I'm your dad. We're good to go. Like, I feel like that's how you should be responding to that, instead of saying like, lady, don't be sad. We're also popular. What?
Right. We also meet all the requirements.
Yeah.
I think some of the other things that this movie is saying about high school is, I do think that this movie is trying to articulate the stakes of senior year of high school, and that you're not just trying to live in high school, but you're trying to set up your adult life and how emotionally high stakes that feels. That if you don't go to the right college, you're not going to have the right adulthood, and you're going to end up like your miserable dad. If you don't shake this I'm being bullied by my fellow art students thing now, then you're going to be tortured. Oh my God, these are the meanest bullies.
What?
These are the meanest bullies.
I wrote down, how is she being bullied by the art nerds? What is this?
The art nerds are telling her to kill herself.
Yes.
I mean, it is awful.
Yes. I was like, yo.
And so I think that's one of the things that this movie is positing, is that high school movies matter because your senior year of high school is where the rest of your life is determined.
Which we know is not true.
It's not true, but it feels that way when you're 18. It's weird that it's reifying the norm instead of questioning the norm. I guess, Ronald, I want to give this movie a little bit of credit. The end of the movie, Zach says, it turns out I don't need to have all the answers now. I'm only 18. I don't know how he earned saying that at the end of the movie. It seems like actually kind of an out of left field. I'm like, that wasn't what I thought the lesson was that we were supposed to be taking. But okay, Zach.
If anything, I guess I shouldn't torture women.
Yes, exactly. I was wrong to torture you.
Yes.
Oh my God. We'll talk in the next episode about how horrible that last scene is. But anyway, I do think that this movie is articulating this idea that high school is stressful because you're trying to figure out who you want to be, which is an interesting take.
I guess, and maybe I have the benefit of being 40 and looking back and saying, we know that's not the case. Because I think for me, that was something that hamstrung me, I think, until I changed careers at age 34. Like, no one told me that, Ronald, just because you didn't learn piano at 12, that doesn't mean you can't pick it up at 36, which I did.
Right.
And be a really good 60-year-old piano player, which is now my goal. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't mean you can't do that. This idea that if you didn't get on if you didn't start doing the thing in high school or at 18 or make the right decision. And that's what I always tell like kids that are in high school and all that, be like, listen, you're not locked in. You could change sports tomorrow. I have a nephew that plays basketball. I'm really trying to get him into tennis. This idea that you can change and redefine yourself is something we should be telling high schoolers. Like, look, you'll finish high school, but in 2 years, you're going to be an entirely different person. So don't think that you're making permanent decisions right now. Yeah. Everything's temporary.
I know. I used to be a freshman advisor to college students, and I would be like, I don't want to sound patronizing, but you don't believe me. You are so young. You're so young, because they didn't. They would show up and be like, it's too late for me to do X, Y, and Z. And I'd be like, you are actually still a child. Yes. And I mean that in the best way. The world is totally open to you. At 18, the only thing it is too late to become is, an Olympic gymnast.
And that's the only thing I would say factually you are correct. But I still think I can make the Olympics in curling. So
absolutely. It's not too late to be an Olympian.
Represent the United States at age 50, Ronald Young Jr. curling.
Cannot wait. Will absolutely go to those Olympics. Okay, Ronald, please finish this sentence for me. You should watch this movie if...
You should watch this movie if you are feeling nostalgic about the 90s and 90s films and want to go on a little journey and be reminded about the mistakes that were made by a Harvey Weinstein production. We didn't even talk about that.
Miramax, baby.
But the mistakes that were made by a movie that was helmed or at least greenlit by Harvey Weinstein. If you want to be reminded of the nostalgia of the 90s, if you want to think about what 90s films were back in those days, if you want to see how far we've come as a society and the differences that we've made, and also how far we have not come as a society and the differences between now and then, this is the movie for you. You should see this movie. Vanessa, can you finish that sentence? You should watch this movie if...
I have two. One is if you loved Sixpence None the Richer. They get Kiss Me. Yeah. I mean...
Beneath the milky twilight.
the out of the bearded barley? What?
Yeah.
Oh
Wow.
my God. So good. Okay. Also, Ronald, you don't know me, but my whole wardrobe is apron and overall vibes.
Love it.
And I just think if you love overalls and aprons, there's a moment in this film where, out of solidarity to Lainey, everyone starts wearing overalls and aprons.
Yes.
And I'm like, if you want to just bask in the Vanessa look, watch this movie.
I'm about to get some overalls right now.
Next week, we are going to be talking about the final scene of She's All That. Ronald Young Jr., thank you so much for joining. And please come back next week for us to talk about the ending of this film.
Unfortunately, I'm not available next week, but you have a good
shit.
time.
Okay.
No, I'll be back. I'll see you next week.
So we've been talking about prom for a while now. We saw prom in Pretty in Pink, and Hannah and I have come to joke about just like the way that prom or some big event becomes this locus of a tremendous amount of plot and emotional stakes in these movies that we're talking about. And we wanted to understand sort of where that came from. We know that prom is a thing. We don't know why it's a thing, or I don't know why it's a thing. And so I would love to understand more about that. So to that end, we are getting Professor Amy Best on the phone. Amy is a professor of sociology at George Mason University and the author of Prom Night, Youth, Schools, and Popular Culture, and also of Fast Cars, Cool Rides, and the other is called Fast Food Kids. Let's get Amy on the phone. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the idea of prom emerged? Like, when did they become popular?
That's such a good question, and it's such a big question, too. But in a nutshell, the prom sort of grew hand in hand with the expansion of schooling. And so there was a period of time where adolescents did not actually spend a lot of time in school. And so that, which, really sort of taking shape in the late 1800s, early 19th century, through the 1930s was really a sort of a mass migration of young people into school.
And that has something to do with child labor laws. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So child labor laws, it began to take shape really in the 1880s. Adolescents' worlds in terms of sort of public life continued to narrow and center more fully on school. But there were also these other kind of cultural currents, social reform efforts that weren't necessarily related to labor, but were related to growing cultural anxieties about urbanization and the expansion of cultural life, economy, is our presence in this kind of global context that focused its attention toward adolescence and thinking about the work of becoming adults as a major cultural project. So proms exist in that history. There were also these social reform efforts to better integrate a growing immigrant population and their children into elements of American cultural life. Sometimes historians will talk about it as like an Americanizing project. Sometimes they talk about it as a democratizing project. Depending on where you land, sometimes there wasn't a lot of democracy going on there, but there really was this effort to find ways to more fully integrate newly arriving folks into the fold of American cultural life, for better or for worse. There was lots of elements of middle class impositions as to what it meant to be, an appropriate girl or an appropriate boy in the context of a more formal dance, which had been pretty exclusively reserved for the upper classes, and were now suddenly part of schooling projects, ensuring that there were not these kinds of drift toward waywardness among young people. So all that's to say is that there's lots of contradictory cultural pulls that brought us the contemporary prom.
It never occurred to me that proms happen in high schools because they are a part of a young person's education. They're like cotillion. They're teaching you how to attend a certain kind of country club party. It's like prom as pedagogy. It's happening in school.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that I think reflects one element of the prom, which is the adult influence over what the prom is. I mean, proms are also these youth events, and so there's certainly youth influence as well. So there's lots of different actors that help us to define what the prom is. And I love your framing of the prom as pedagogy. I talk about that actually in the book, as there really were these kind of cultural projects going on through the prom.
You draw a connection between proms and commodity culture. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't think you can really sort of understand the prom without understanding the expansion of consumer markets. And when I think about that, I mean, certainly consumer markets existed pre-World War II, but the expansion and consolidation of a teen-centered market really took shape during the post-war period and only accelerated in the 1980s. And that was a period where you saw really a proliferation of prom films. I mean, John Hughes certainly had something to do with that too, but there were these broader economic and cultural currents in play, in part because we were moving away from mass marketing toward more segmented marketing. So then there was, like teen markets really took shape. And I can say when I was studying the prom in the late 1990s, where I was attending proms and studying it more systematically, I've been following it since, there were suddenly this proliferation of prom magazines that actually had not existed prior. They would show up every once in a while, like prom stories would show up in teen magazines, but entire issues dedicated to the prom was a newly emerging thing in the 1990s.
So I'm just noticing, rom-coms often end in weddings. And, in this mini season that we've been doing about high school adaptations, a lot of them end in proms. And I'm just suddenly seeing all the parallels between proms and weddings, right? Like your family gets together to take photos and you're looking for the perfect dress. And there's even something about like prom being a night that you lose your virginity. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that like prom as rehearsal for wedding.
Yeah. That's such a good observation, because there are really tremendous parallels between, the white weddings and proms. And so that in some sense, proms are often thought as sort of a pre or a runner-up to the wedding. And certainly prom magazines really capitalize on that and run with it, right? So it really benefits commercial markets in that sense. But there's also, other people invest in that narrative too. Parents, certainly mothers certainly invest in that narrative. And then there's these kind of, things that are really kind of specific to cultural moments. I mean, proms are interesting because they're enduring culturally. And like all cultural things, they always bear the mark of a historical moment. So like prom proposals have come to assume this significance. And they are really these interesting things, because it seems to me part of their meaning and their appeal is that there's all these ideas about care and value steeped up in the prom proposal. So like a really thoughtful or public prom proposal becomes this expression of care toward, in most cases, the girl. And that sort of extends ideas about prom romance more generally, because it really is about what the guy does for the girl, whether he gives her his jacket because she's cold, or looks into her eyes as they're dancing. It's there's these interesting things about who is sort of doing the acting and who is the recipient of that care and affection.
Oh yeah, I remember in the 9th grade, the head prefect of my school who ran assembly was this woman named Lindsay, and I thought she was just the coolest. I thought she was the coolest. And her boyfriend interrupted assembly that she was running in order to propose to her. And I was so mad at him. I was like, she wouldn't be able to do this to you. If she did this to you, she would be psycho. She's at work. Like, don't interrupt her. Like, it really bothered me. Anyway, I'm sorry. Okay, we're running out of time. I need to ask you this one thing that you write a lot about, and I really want to hear what you have to say. You write a lot about race and the class dimensions to prom. I know that there's so much that we can't get to, but what are some of the things that you can tell us?
Yeah, I mean, so one is, I mean, just the history of the prom and, the persisting segregation around proms, racial segregation. So it's not something that belongs to our past, but is very much a part of our present. And in racially integrated schools, because there is a fair amount of racial segmentation, even in more integrated schools, being mindful in the planning of how you create structures of inclusion and belonging, so that the prom really reflects the sort of expressive interests and the mark of different groups. And so race is really a part of that. Certainly proms have been seized as these bizarre moments to reassert a kind of white dominance too. And so, and just the community responses to interracial dating in parts of the US, certainly not all parts, but parts of the US, provides indication and reminder that those racial histories are very much a part of the contemporary landscape, and being mindful of that. And class sort of gets cut in a couple different ways, right? So there are, when we think about class, there's like cultural norms that are class-based, right? So what are middle-class conceptions of what an appropriate set of behaviors at the prom are? So thinking that way. But then there's also sort of this kind of financial element of the prom too, which is the amount of cost that is involved in a prom. But what I will say is, and I do think this is true, is that when you look to youth, young people, they are always finding ways to push back and create alternatives. So even the sort of secondary economy of prom gently used prom dresses, a lot of that is youth driven. And so all of that's to me means that a lot of the sort of critical work that takes place around the prom, we can look to young people for moving through and thinking through some of what that critical work is, whether we're talking about challenges to particular racial frameworks or class logics. Young people have sort of responded, sometimes like creatively through irony in dress, and sometimes through mobilizations and pushing back against some of those rules that you were talking about earlier, and saying, hey, these are actually like pretty ridiculous, and they reproduce some of the elements of American culture that we don't like, which are these problematic racial histories and class histories.
Thank you so much for your time. And
thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise. You've been listening to Hot and Bothered. We are a small show. And one of the ways that you can support us is by right now sending your favorite episode of our show to a friend. It's so easy. Just text it to a friend. Obviously, we love our current season, but I don't know, maybe you have a Twilight fan friend in your life. Send them an episode of Twilight in Quarantine. There's a lot in our back catalog, and we would really appreciate it. We are a Not Sorry production. I'm the executive producer, and we are edited and produced by Ariana Nettleman and distributed by Acast. A huge thank you to our soulmates. Molly Reilly, who we would chase through an airport to declare our love to, Becky Boo, who we would wait for hours on the top of the Empire State Building for, Elizabeth Schweinsberg, whose heart we would play a game of one-on-one basketball for, Lauren Byer O'Connell, who we would call up on stage to dance with us in front of the whole summer camp, Claudia Hammerman, who we would give the whole door to float on, even if there was room for both of us, Avi Lichtenstein, who we would make every person in the kingdom try on a shoe for, Kristen Hall, who we would travel through a time portal to spend the 19th century with, Shiri Yadlin, who we would write a sonnet about and read it in front of the whole class, and Delia Rose, who we are majorly, totally, but crazy in love with. Huge, huge, huge thank you this week to the wonderful, brilliant, charming, fantastic Ronald Young Jr. You'll hear him again next week, and we love Ronald and all of his work. And to Amy Best, our brilliant professor, for coming on today. And our wonderful team, Julia Argy, AJ Uramas, Courtney Brown and Isa Ahmed, Danny Langley, Nikki Zoltan, and Stephanie Paul Sell.